The Fall of the Pretentious Man, the Ghost Librarian. That gunshot you just heard wasn't a celebration. It was the starting pistol for the total and absolute demolition of a billionaire's life. Are you ready to witness the collapse? Hit the like button now and subscribe so you don't miss the checkmate. Here, the true cost of arrogance. Part 1. The Marble and the Woman in Beige. The charity gala was exactly the sort of event Ethan Thorne now considered his natural habitat. It wasn't the Met, not yet, but the Hudson Legacy Foundation Ball was a significant step up. The ballroom at the Carlyle was saturated with old money and new ambition, an intoxicating perfume of opportunity. Ethan, resplendent in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo, moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of a man who genuinely believed he had arrived. On his arm was Skylar Vance, a woman who seemed genetically engineered to be an accessory for a life like his. She was 24, had a venture capitalist father, and an Instagram following that quantified her worth. "Ethan, darling," she purred, tapping a manicured finger on his lapel. "Isn't that Philip Tagle from Apex Ventures? You simply must talk to him." "All in good time, my love," Ethan murmured, scanning the room. He was hunting bigger game. He was here to be seen. His divorce from Elena, finalized 6 months prior, had been an act of liberation. He had, in his own words, jettisoned dead weight. Elena had been ordinary, so overwhelmingly, exasperatingly ordinary. She was the librarian, the quiet background, beige-colored wife he married when he was still a nobody. She was content with simple things: second-hand books, long walks, quiet evenings. She had no ambition, no spark. She didn't understand his need to conquer. When he finally landed his first big bonus, his first instinct wasn't to celebrate it per se, but to suggest they finally fix the broken furnace. He had left her for Skylar, a decision he viewed as a corporate merger for his own life. And then he saw her. He froze, his champagne flute halfway to his lips. "What the hell is she doing here?" Skylar followed his gaze. "Who?" "Elena, my ex-wife." She was standing near a side exit, not mingling, just observing. She wasn't dressed for a gala. She wore a simple dark blue dress that looked plucked off a department store rack, not couture. She carried a simple clutch bag. Her hair was pulled back. She looked, as always, utterly inconsequential. A wave of irritation mixed with a strange, acidic pity rose in Ethan. "This is embarrassing," he hissed, mostly to himself. "She must have snuck in, or she's working the event." "Oh, that's her." Skylar's voice dripped with condescension. She assessed her with a single dismissive glance. "Oh, honey, she looks tired." "She looks desperate," Ethan corrected. He straightened his tie, a plan forming. He couldn't have her here. It contaminated his new image. He began to stride towards her, Skylar trailing in his wake, a wolf closing in. "Elena," he said. His voice was loud enough to cause a few nearby heads to turn. Elena looked up, her gray eyes revealing no surprise, only a flat stillness. "Ethan," she said, allowing a slight smile to play on her lips. "What a surprise. I didn't think this was your scene. Honestly, how did you get a ticket? Did you call in a favor with the catering?" Skylar let out a sound like a suppressed giggle. "Look at this, whatever this is." Elena's gaze was steady. "I was invited." "Invited?" Ethan laughed. "By whom? The florist?" "Look at this." He gestured to the opulent room. "This isn't you. You were always more simple. You should leave. You're making people uncomfortable." "Am I?" Elena asked, her voice soft. "Or am I just making you uncomfortable, Ethan?" "Don't be ridiculous," Skylar interjected, stepping forward. "He's just trying to spare you the embarrassment. You're clearly out of your depth. This is an event for doers, for world changers, not for, well, whatever you do now. Cataloging books." Elena's eyes flicked to Skylar, then back to Ethan. You told me I had no ambition, Ethan. That I didn't understand the world you wanted to live in. You said I was a charming but ultimately simple chapter. I believe those were your words. And I was right, Ethan said. His patience snapped. He felt Philip Tagle's eyes on him across the room and wanted this over. If you're enjoying this content, smash that like button and leave a comment. You are simple. You are ordinary. And I am not. Now, please leave. You're ruining the atmosphere. He took Skylar's arm, preparing to make a grand turning exit. He leaned in, dropping his voice to a hiss. This is my world now, Elena. You were never built for it. Know your limitations. He turned and walked away. He heard a few people at the next table murmur. He felt a surge of pride. He had drawn the line. He had put the past and its ordinariness firmly in its place. Elena watched him go. She stood for a moment longer, a ghost in the gleaming machine. Then she turned, slipped through the side exit, and disappeared into the New York night. She walked 2 blocks, her simple heels clicking on the icy pavement until she reached a discreet sedan parked nearby. She got in, the engine purring to a silent life. The designer gowns and the clinking glasses of the gala faded behind her. She drove for 10 minutes, away from the lights, away from the town, toward the darkness of the mountains. She pulled up to a small private airstrip, used only by charter flights and the ultra-rich. She parked the sedan and walked toward a small, heated hangar, the door code typed from memory. Inside, her ordinary life ended. Hanging on a rack was a simple black flight suit. On a steel table lay an encrypted satellite phone. She picked it up. There was one text message received an hour ago. It contained only a set of coordinates and 3 words. They need you. AV. Elena peeled off the simple blue dress, letting it drop to the floor. She zipped up the flight suit. Her movements were economical and precise. She wasn't a librarian. She hadn't been a simple wife. She had been hiding. Her marriage to Ethan had been a cover, a deep psychological cover after her last job, a job that nearly killed her. She had chosen the most predictable man she could find in the most ordinary town to disappear into a beige life. Ethan, in his towering arrogance, had been the perfect camouflage. He never looked close enough to see the steel beneath the softness. He only saw what he wanted to see, a mirror for his own grandeur. He had forgotten she designed the house. She checked the fuel gauges on the sleek, matte black Pilatus PC-12 waiting in the hangar. Her real life. She climbed into the cockpit. The familiar glow of the avionics lit up her face. She was Elena, but to the only 4 people in the world who mattered, she was known as Cerebra, the ghost, the most sought after and feared strategic advisor on the planet. She keyed the mic. Aspen Tower, this is November 12th, Victor Alpha, ready for departure. IFR clearance. As the plane ascended into the dark sky, Elena looked down at the glittering jewel of the Carlisle Hotel. She thought of Ethan strutting in his tuxedo, sneering at her. A small, cold smile touched her lips. He has no idea. She whispered into the darkness. He never did. Part 2. The Fortress and the Pawn Lack Pawn. The Aegis Global Summit wasn't an event you were invited to. You were summoned. It was held every 2 years, always in a location that was both breathtaking and nearly impossible to access. This year, it was the Summit Fortress, a hyper-futuristic compound built into a private mountain peak in the most remote part of the Wyoming Rockies. It was inaccessible by road. The only way in or out was by air. This wasn't Davos. Davos was for politicians and celebrities. Aegis was for the people who owned the politicians and celebrities. It was a gathering of the 0.01%, the reclusive titans who moved global markets with a single phone call. And this year, the summit was a war room. Alexander Alex Vance, the AV from the text, was in trouble. Vance was a legend, a trillion-dollar man who had built Vance Holdings from nothing into a global empire spanning green tech, aerospace, and data analytics. He was also Elena's first and most important client. He had found her as a 22-year-old prodigy at MIT, writing a thesis on predictive economic models so advanced the U.S. Treasury had tried to classify them. He had funded her, protected her, and unleashed her. And in return, she had made him indestructible, until now. The threat had a name: Marcus Kane. Kane was new money, but brutal. He was a corporate raider who didn't just buy companies, he dismembered them. He saw Vance Holdings not as a legacy, but as a carcass to be stripped. He had spent the last year launching a catastrophic, high-speed, hostile takeover using algorithmic trading, media manipulation, and political sabotage. And according to Alex's latest frantic message, Kane was winning. Elena's Pilates sliced through the sub-zero air. She wasn't headed to the summit. Not yet. She landed at a private airstrip 100 miles south of the summit fortress. A black armored Mercedes Maybach waited on the tarmac, engine running. Her ordinary life was a distant, comical memory. The blue dress, Ethan's smug, punchable face. It was the life of a character she had played. Now she was back in her own skin. She spent the 90-minute drive in the back of the Maybach, which was a mobile command center. Screens flickered, showing real-time data streams from Vance's company. She absorbed everything: stock fluctuations, encrypted board communications, derivatives, swaps. Her mind was a high-speed processor sorting, analyzing, and finding the pattern. "He's not just attacking the stock, Alex," she said, her voice crisp. The satellite call was secure. "He's attacking your supply chain." Alex's voice, usually a calm baritone, was frayed. "Elena, he's choking us. He bought out 2 of our key microchip suppliers. He bribed the port commissioner in Houston, my Aquila 7 satellite, the one that secures the next decade of my company. It's grounded. If I can't launch it in 72 hours, I lose the launch window and the government contract. The stock will collapse. He'll walk away with the company for pennies." "Marcus is a brute, Alex. He uses a hammer," Elena said, her eyes scanning lines of code. "He thinks you're going to panic." "I am panicking, Elena. That's why you're here." "No, you're rattled," she corrected. "Panic is what he'll be doing shortly. He's at the summit fortress, correct?" "Yes, bragging about his victory. He's holding court. He's even hired Ethan Thorne." Elena's fingers paused on the keyboard. "Who?" "Ethan Thorne, your ex-husband. He's a mid-level analyst at BlackRock, but he's been trying to get Kane's attention for months. Apparently, he fed Kane some low-level intel on one of our subsidiaries. Kane, as a final insult, hired him last week. He's at the summit fortress as part of Kane's delegation. A trophy. A way to mock me. And, well, I'm sorry, Elena." Elena was silent. The sheer, predictable stupidity of the man. Ethan trying to swim with sharks, oblivious that he was the bait. He thought he had arrived. He was just a pawn, a final petty gesture by Kane. "He's irrelevant," Elena said, and she meant it. "Ethan is a rounding error, a distraction. Forget him. Focus on the problem. You need a launch. Marcus is blocking the ports. It's impossible, Elena. We're trapped." "Nothing," Elena said, narrowing her eyes as she found the flaw in Kane's plan. "Is impossible. You just lack the proper leverage. The Aquila 7 is in its hangar in Mojave, correct?" "Yes, but the guidance system, the chips, are stuck in Houston." "Forget the Houston chips," Elena said. "They are a lost cause. Let Kane keep them. We are going to use the Talon system instead." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Elena, Talon is..." It's not ready. It's experimental. It's not even ours. It belongs to Raikkonen Dynamics, Elena finished. And Kimi Raikkonen is at the Summit Fortress right now, trying to raise funding for her Mars project. He's allergic to people, hates summits, and is probably hiding in his room. You are going to him. You are not going to offer him cash. You are going to offer him a 10% stake in Vance Aerospace and full access to your Aquila launch data for his Mars project. A 10% stake, that's billions, and losing your company is trillions, Elena snapped. Subscribe to the channel right now if you want to see how this checkmate plays out. He will have the Talon guidance system on a plane tonight. I will handle the logistics to get it to Mojave and integrate it. We launch in 48 hours. Marcus Kane will wake up, read the news, and find his entire strategy worthless. He'll be holding a bag of useless microchips he paid a fortune for. Alex was silent. The sound of his breathing was all that was on the line. God, Elena, that's why it's you. Can you come to the Summit Fortress? I need you. I need to show them, all of them, that I'm not finished. Elena looked out the window. The Maybach was pulling into a private, fortified compound. This was her base of operations, where she would wage war. I'll be there, she said. But not yet. I have to secure the asset. You go make the deal with Raikkonen. I'll make the calls to Mojave. When I arrive, Alex, I want it public. I want everyone to see me. Understood, Alex said, a new strength in his voice. They won't know what hit them. No, Elena countered, hanging up the call. They won't. Part 3. The crash of Ethan, the grand terrace at the summit at Fortress, was an engineering miracle. A massive, cantilevered slab of white marble and reinforced glass. It jutted out over a 4,000-foot drop. The air was thin, cold, and crackled with the energy of unimaginable wealth. Ethan Thorne felt like he could fly. He held a glass of 30-year-old Macallan, the amber liquid glowing in the late afternoon sun. He was in, not just in, but in the inner circle. He'd been at the Summit Fortress for 2 days, and it had already changed his life. Marcus Kane, his new boss, held court by the huge centralized sculpture. Kane was a physical man, built like a retired linebacker with a voice that boomed across the terrace. He laughed, clapped men on the back, the picture of a conquering hero. And Ethan was his new lieutenant. "Thorne, get over here!" Kane shouted, beckoning. Ethan practically leaped, his chest swelling. Skylar, who had of course come with him, was by the railing, casually taking a selfie with a Dubai prince in the background. "Yes, Mr. Kane. Tell these old fools what you told me." Kane chuckled, slinging a heavy arm over Ethan's shoulders. "About the Vance corporate culture. The dead weight, the rot." Ethan, high on the attention, launched into the same pitch he'd given Kane in his first interview. "It's a company built on a fossilized legacy, Mr. Kane. Stagnant, no innovation. Alex Vance is a dinosaur held up by reputation. He's surrounded by yes-men. He lost his edge years ago." "See?" Kane roared to the cluster of rival CEOs. "The rot is internal. When I take over, the first thing I'm doing is firing half the board and liquidating the aerospace division. It's a vanity project, a money pit." Some of the men nodded, eager to agree with the new alpha predator. Ethan felt a chill. He was shaping the conversation. He, Ethan Thorne, was providing the intellectual justification for the biggest takeover of the decade. And, Ethan added, feeling bold, his weakness has been personal. He's isolated. No family, no real connections. He's a lonely man on a collapsing throne. "Well said, Thorne, well said." Kane drained his glass. "A lonely man, I like that." Across the terrace, Alex Vance observed this display. He sat alone at a small table, sipping coffee. He looked exactly as Ethan had described, a dinosaur, isolated, defeated. The other summit attendees gave him a wide berth, as if his failure was contagious. Vance's phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Raikkonen agreed. Tylon is airborne. ETA Mojave. 0400. Integration team is ready. Dealing with the second problem now. Vance looked up. His eyes met Kane's. Kane raised his glass in a mock toast, a cruel, triumphant smile on his face. Vance did not smile back. He simply stood up and walked back inside, a defeated man. Kane's laughter boomed. He's retreating! He's running to his room to cry! Ethan laughed with him, the loudest of them all. He had never felt so powerful. He hated Elena for making him feel small for so long, for her quiet judgment, her lack of faith in him. And now he was here, and she was shelving books in some dusty, forgotten library. He looked at Skylar. This, he whispered, pulling her close, is what winning feels like. This is the big league. Oh, Ethan, Skylar breathed. You're amazing. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the laughter and the high-altitude wind. It wasn't the polite whine of the Bell 407s that had been ferrying most guests up the mountain. It was a dull, guttural, percussive beat. Thud. 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 It was a sound that didn't just break the sound barrier. It bullied it. It was the sound of raw, unadulterated power. The conversations on the terrace faltered. Heads turned, scanning the bright blue sky. What the hell is that? Kane demanded. His good humor evaporated. The sound was an intrusion, unwelcome. It's a helicopter, someone said. Stating the obvious. I know it's a helicopter, you idiot, Kane snapped. But what helicopter? That's not one of the summits. It crested the peak, a monstrous shape against the sun. It was a Sikorsky S-92, not civilian spec. This one was matte black with modified lines. It looked less like corporate transport and more like something that belonged to an elite strike team. It was the kind of machine that didn't ask for landing clearance. It took it. Ethan squinted, annoyed. Who the hell is arriving now? The summit is 2 days in. It's bad taste to arrive this late. The Sikorsky didn't aim for the main helipad. It bypassed it, heading for Alex Vance's private, reinforced landing pad, the one attached to his main penthouse at the Summit Fortress. The rotor wash was immense. It blasted the terrace, sending napkins flying and champagne flutes rattling. Arrogant, Kane muttered, brushing off his suit. The chopper settled onto the pad, its engines winding down with a high-pitched whine. Every person on the terrace, the Titans, the Kings, the Predators, was silent, watching. An arrival like this was a statement. Ethan narrowed his eyes, trying to see who was important enough to command such an entrance. It's probably some government official trying to look important. The side door of the Sikorsky slid open. The first to emerge were not passengers. They were operators. 2 men dressed in discreet but clearly high-end tactical gear. Charcoal gray Arc'teryx shells, no visible weapons, but the air of lethal competence was unmistakable. They stepped onto the pad and scanned the area. Their movements were fluid and economical. They were not summit security. They were private. Marcus Kane stood very still. What is this? Ethan, still oblivious, simply scoffed. What a production. It's probably just a PR stunt. The 2 operators took positions on either side of the door. Then, Alex Vance, the man who had looked so defeated just moments ago, stepped out of his penthouse onto the landing pad. He wasn't wearing his funereal suit. He wore a crisp, open-necked shirt, and he looked different. Calm. He walked toward the helicopter and stood by the door. He wasn't greeting a guest. He was waiting for one. This new detail silenced the terrace entirely. Alex Vance, the trillionaire, was waiting for someone else. Alex extended his hand into the dark interior of the cabin. A moment later, a hand took his, and she stepped out. The sun hit her, And Ethan's world stopped. It was Elena. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. This woman was not ordinary. She was not beige. She was not the simple librarian he had mocked. This woman was a blade. She wore no makeup, but her skin was flawless. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. She wore a dark gray, perfectly tailored Armani pantsuit that was the color of a storm. Her only accessories were a watch, a simple steel Patek Philippe, and dark, impenetrable sunglasses. She didn't look at the crowd. She didn't look at the stunning view. She stepped off the chopper, released Alex's hand, and spoke to him. She was too far away to hear, but her body language was all business. He nodded in deference. He, Alex Vance, nodded to her. Elena turned to one of her bodyguards, gave a crisp command, and then turned back to Vance. She gestured toward the penthouse. "Business now. Ethan." Skylar's voice was a thin, reedy sound. "Ethan? Who is that?" Ethan couldn't speak. His throat had closed up. The glass of Macallan in his hand was so slick with his own sweat that it slipped from his fingers, hitting the marble with a pathetic, dull clack. It didn't break. It just rolled, spilling 30-year-old scotch at his feet. His entire brain was a blue screen of death. "Error. Cannot compute." "That is," whispered the man next to him, a rival CEO. "My God, is that Cerebra?" "Cerebra?" another asked. "The ghost? I've only heard rumors. They say she's not a person, she's a concept. They say she engineered the bailout of the EU's Project Sunrise. They say she's the only person the new Chinese premier will take a call from." Marcus Kane was no longer smiling. His face had gone chalk white. He knew the name. Everyone at this level knew the name. They thought she was a myth, a legend created by Vance to intimidate his rivals. They were wrong. Elena and Vance turned to walk inside and paused for a split second. She turned her head, sunglasses still on, and scanned the terrace. It wasn't a look. It was a target acquisition sweep. Her head swiveled past Ethan. Her eyes, hidden behind the dark lenses, did not stop. They did not register his existence. He was nothing. A tree, a rock, a piece of furniture. To her, he was just part of the background. In that single half-second of disregard, Ethan Thorne experienced a humiliation so profound, so complete, that it emptied him. His public sneering at the Carlisle Gala, his "know your limitations" speech, his condescending pity, his new life, his new fiancée, his new master of the universe status. It all collapsed into a black hole of his own insignificance. She wasn't the one who was ordinary. He was. Elena turned, and with Alex Vance following half a step behind her, she stepped off the helipad and disappeared into the penthouse. The terrace was silent. The only sound was the high-altitude wind, which suddenly felt very, very cold. All the power, all the money, all the ambition. It had just shifted. It had tilted on its axis, and now it all pointed toward the woman who had just arrived. Skylar was staring at Ethan, but not with love, with mounting horror and contempt. "You!" she whispered, her voice laced with venom. "You idiot! You told me she was a nobody!" Ethan opened his mouth. No sound came out. He had said she was ordinary. And she had just stepped off a Billionaire'S helicopter in a total, deafening silence and erased his entire world. Part 4. The Last Gasp and the Takeoff. The penthouse was a fortress of glass and steel, silent and isolated from the world. The living room wasn't a living room. It was a command center. Holographic displays, data streams, and encrypted communications arrays lined the walls. Elena didn't pause. She pulled off her suit jacket, tossing it onto a chair. "Report!" Alex and his two top aides, who had been waiting in a state of near panic, snapped to attention. "Elena," Alex started. "This is Marcus and Chen. They have the latest. Tylon is integrated. We're launch ready, but," Marcus, the aerospace head, said, "Kane wasn't just blocking the ports. He's filed an emergency court injunction, a security review, citing untested guidance systems. He's using our own safety protocols against us. It will hold the Aquila on the ground for at least a week. The launch window will be gone. The stock will crash." Alex sagged. He's 3 steps ahead. He knew we'd try something. Elena held up a hand. He is not 3 steps ahead. He is 1 step ahead. And he is sloppy. He used a hammer again. She walked to the main communications panel. "Who is the commissioner he bought?" "Javier Lynch, head of the Western Range Oversight Committee," said Chen. "The legal counsel," his voice shaking. Elena's fingers flew over a keyboard. She wasn't hacking. She was simply accessing. "Javier Lynch, married, 2 kids, a $1.2 million mortgage on a $400,000 salary, a boat at the marina, a daughter at Harvard. He's dirty. We know, Alex, frustrating. But we can't prove it in time." "We don't need to prove it," Elena said. She stopped typing. There was a file on her screen. "Lynch's daughter's tuition. It's not paid by Lynch. It's paid by a blind trust. The Argos Fund established 3 months ago." "Kane's bribe fund," Alex breathed. "Exactly. Chen, you're a lawyer. You are calling Lynch right now. You are telling him you are filing a sealed RICO suit with the Southern District of New York, naming him and the Argos Fund as co-conspirators in a stock manipulation scheme. You are telling him you have full auditable proof of the fund paying his daughter's tuition. And you are telling him the only way his daughter doesn't get expelled and he doesn't end up in federal prison is if his security review finds 0 issues in the next 30 minutes. Chen was pale. That's extortion." Elena turned to him, her gray eyes devoid of warmth. "This is checkmate. Do it." Chen galvanized, grabbed a secure phone, and ran to the next room. "Marcus," Elena said, turning to the aerospace head. "Kane's injunction isn't his only play. He'll have a backup. He will try to sabotage the launch pad. I want our internal Falcon drone security active. All of it. Fix the exclusion zone at 5 miles. I want anything moving, man or animal, tagged and tracked. Non-lethal deterrence authorized. Go." Marcus scrambled to his own station. Elena and Alex were left alone. "You're terrifying, Elena," he said, not unkindly. "I'm efficient," she corrected. "Marcus Kane thinks this is a money game. He thinks he can buy his way to victory. He doesn't understand. This is an information game. He's loud. He's arrogant. He leaves a trail." She thought for an instant of Ethan. Men like that, they are their own worst enemies. Their ego is a liability. You just have to know where to press. "And Ethan Thorne?" Alex asked, watching her. "He's part of Kane's team. He's here." Elena looked at him. "Ethan is a symptom. He's a barnacle attached to the whale. He thinks he's moving the ocean. But he's just along for the ride. He's not a player, Alex. He's a pawn. And pawns," she said, dropping her voice, "are meant to be sacrificed." A low-level hum came from the main console, a proximity alert. "What is it?" Alex asked. Elena's eyes narrowed. "Someone is on the terrace just outside the penthouse. They bypassed the main security." "Kane?" "No, not his style. This is sloppy." She pressed a button. The soundproof glass turned into a one-way mirror, showing her the view outside. But they remained invisible. It was Ethan. He looked broken. His suit was rumpled. His hair was a mess. He stood on the glass, staring at his own pathetic reflection, unaware she was on the other side, watching him. Skylar was gone. He raised a fist, and in a pathetic gesture of rage, he pounded the glass. No sound came inside. "Elena!" he screamed. his voice a dull, distant wail against the triple-pane, impact-proof glass. "Elena, I know you're there. You made me look like a fool." He dropped to his knees. "How could you? How? What are you? You were my wife. You were ordinary. You were mine." Alex looked at Elena, his face full of pity and distaste. "Do you want him removed?" Elena watched her ex-husband, the man who had mocked her for his own sport, sobbing on his knees. She felt nothing. No anger, no pity, not even satisfaction. It was like watching a documentary about a particularly uninteresting species of insect. "No," she said. Her voice flat. "He is irrelevant. He will leave when he gets cold." She turned away from the window, back to the data streams. "Chen's call should be done. We have a satellite to launch." Part 5. The epilogue of arrogance. The news broke at 5 a.m., just as the sun was beginning to touch the peaks. It didn't come from a press release. It came as a physical fact. A low rumbling boom that shook the ground vibrated throughout the summit fortress, waking every CEO and financier from their sleep. On the huge screens in the central summit hall, the live feed from SpaceX, who handled the broadcast, flickered on. Vance Aerospace, Aquila 7, successful launch, Mojave Air and Spaceport. The video was undeniable. The huge rocket ignited a trail of fire, ascending flawlessly into the pre-dawn sky. The room was silent. Marcus Kane, who had been in a frantic meeting all night, watched the screen, and the blood ran cold. "No," he whispered. "No, Lynch. The injunction." His phone rang. It was his lead counsel. "He's gone dark," the lawyer screamed. "Javier Lynch has gone dark. His phone is off. His house is empty. His family is gone." "What about the launch pad?" Kane roared. "My team. I sent a team." "Detained," the lawyer said. "Picked up by private security for trespassing on a federal exclusion zone. All Cerebra. She cornered us. She knew every move." Kane threw his phone against the wall. It shattered. The Aquila 7 was in orbit. The government contract was secured. Vance's stock in the pre-market wasn't just recovering. It was exploding. It was up 40%. Kane's hostile takeover had not just failed. It had failed spectacularly. He was now shorting a rocket. Margin calls would start in 1 hour. He wasn't just going to lose money. He was going to be annihilated. He looked across the room. Alex Vance stood there in a fresh suit, sipping coffee, calmly observing the rocket telemetry data. He was alone. Elena was nowhere in sight. Her job was done, but Kane's humiliation wasn't complete. "Mr. Kane!" He spun around. It was Ethan Thorne running toward him, his face a mask of desperate, frantic energy. "Mr. Kane, sir, I have information." "Get out of my way, Thorne." Kane started to push past him. "No, wait, it's my ex-wife. I know her. I know her weaknesses." This, of all things, caused Kane to stop. He turned, a look of pure, toxic curiosity on his face. "Weaknesses? And how would you—" "Yes, she's sentimental," Ethan lied, grasping at a straw. She has a soft spot for art, for antiques. She's not just a numbers person, she's—" "And how would you know that, Thorne?" Kane said, his voice dangerously soft. "The man who thought she was a librarian?" Ethan's face crumpled. "You," Kane said, leaning in so close Ethan could smell the rage and scotch on his breath. "You are the reason for this. You were the final insult. You were the signal. You were the pawn." "No, I'm your lieutenant." "You're fired," Kane spat. "You're a fool. You're an embarrassment. You didn't just sleep next to the most powerful woman in the world. You divorced her because she was too ordinary for you." Kane laughed. It was a terrible, broken sound. "Comment below if you've ever underestimated someone this badly. You are the laughingstock, Thorne. The entire summit is laughing at you." He shoved Ethan so hard he stumbled backward, falling onto a lounge chair. Kane stormed out of the hall, his empire collapsing around him. Ethan sat on the floor in his wrinkled, million-dollar suit as the industry titans walked past him. No one offered a hand. No one even looked at him. Skylar was long gone. He'd seen her at 3 a.m. in the lobby, getting into the elevator with the Dubai prince. He was ruined. Not financially. Not yet. But in a way that was far worse. He was a joke. He had flown too close to the sun. He had bragged. He had posed. And he had sneered. And the wife he had thrown away, the ordinary wife, had been the sun all along, and she had burned him to ashes without even realizing he was there. His phone buzzed, a notification from his bank. His joint account with Skylar had just been emptied. He just sat there as the world moved on without him. The image of the Aquila 7 blazing on the screen above. The epilogue. The final dismissal. The private airstrip 100 miles south of the Summit Fortress was a study in desolation. It was not a place for arrivals. It was a place for disappearances. A single, wind-whipped runway cut a black line across a sea of white. Snow had begun to fall, not in soft flakes, but in hard, stinging pellets driven by a wind that moaned across the empty landscape. The cold was absolute. It was a cold that felt personal, a living thing seeking to find and freeze the marrow of the bones. Elena's Pilatus PC-12 waited, a sleek gray shape against the turbulent gray sky. Its engines were on a low idle, the propellers turning in a slow, hypnotic arc, ready to bite the air. She had been on the ground for exactly 20 minutes. In that time, she had debriefed with her ground crew, confirmed the Aquila 7 telemetry was stable, and was already running diagnostics on her next project, a deep data analysis of water rights negotiations in the Zambezi River Basin. The file on the Summit Fortress, the Alex Vance, Marcus Kane, was already closed in her mind, marked success, and filed away. She wore a long, dark wool coat over her suit. Her duffel bag, containing a change of clothes, a secure laptop, and 3 encrypted hard drives, was slung over her shoulder. She walked toward the plane, her boots crunching on the thin layer of ice when the sound came. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't the engines. It was a scream. "Elena!" It was a raw, emo animal sound ripped from a throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. She paused, her back to the noise. She did not sigh. She did not flinch. She simply stopped, calculating. The sound was not a threat. It was a nuisance. A loose thread she thought she had already clipped. She heard him run, the frantic, irregular thud-slap-thud of a man in expensive, thin-soled dress shoes, slipping and sliding on the icy tarmac. "Elena, please, wait!" Slowly she turned. He looked like a survivor of some terrible wreck. He was without a coat. His Tom Ford tuxedo, the one he had worn with such peacock pride, was now a rumpled, ruined mess, stained with what looked like motor oil from the desperate charter chopper he must have taken. He must have burned the last of his credit, or promised some astronomical fee to get here. His hair was matted with sweat and melted snow. His face was a mask of raw, red, cracked skin, his eyes wide, and streaks of dried tears visible on his cheeks. He stumbled, recovered, and finally skidded to a stop 10 feet from her, breathing in great, gasping sobs that steamed in the freezing air. "Elena," he choked out, holding up a hand as if to keep her from fading. I'm sorry." She said nothing. She simply watched him. Her face was impassive, shielded from the wind by the high collar of her coat. She was a statue of judgment, and he was the penitent breaking himself against her. I didn't know," he pleaded, the words tumbling out. You have to You have to believe me. How could I? How could I have known? You lied to me for years." He was starting to get angry. Pity turned to blame, as it always did with him. You were a librarian. What are you?" "That," she said, her voice quiet, but it cut the wind like a razor, "is the only question you have ever asked me that truly matters, and you had a decade to find the answer." "But our life," he shouted, his voice cracking. Our marriage, was it all a joke to you? All those years, the house, the dinners, the us, were you just laughing at me?" Elena allowed a cold, clinical thought to surface. She analyzed him. The self-pity, the victimhood, the utter inability to comprehend a universe that didn't revolve around him. "Laughing at you, Ethan?" she said. "No, I never laughed. Laughter implies amusement. You were a condition. You were camouflage. I was a fugitive in a sense, hiding from a life that almost killed me. And you were the most ordinary, incurious, self-absorbed man I could find. You were the perfect hiding place." "Incurious," he repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. I asked about your day every day." "You asked," she corrected, "but you never listened. You asked, 'How is your day?' as a preamble to telling me about yours. You were so busy building your own narrative, trying to impress a world you thought was watching you, that you never looked at the person living in your own house. You saw a quiet, simple woman, because that is what you needed to see. You needed a beige background to make your own colors look brighter. You didn't want me to be anything more." She let that hang in the air. He was shivering, but not just from the cold. "So what? I was just a cover? A pawn?" He had used the same word Cain had. She saw the bitter irony. "You weren't a pawn in my game, Ethan," she said. "You weren't on my board at all. You were on an entirely different board. One you built for yourself. I was simply biding my time, waiting. You mistook the chrysalis for the butterfly. But, he was desperate now. The reality of his own insignificance was crashing into him. I can change. I see you now. I understand. I can be useful to you." He took a step forward, hands outstretched. I'm good with people. I'm good at strategy. You need a public face, someone to run things. I can do that. I can be whatever you want. I can be your whatever. Just don't leave me like this. Please." Of all the things he had said, that was the most telling, the most pathetic. Elena's gaze, if possible, grew colder. "What you feel right now, Ethan, is not love. It's not even regret for what you lost. It is envy. You are mourning the status you think I could give you. You have simply traded one trophy, Skylar, for a new one you think is more powerful. You haven't changed. You've simply recalculated. You are still the same man, just with a new price tag." "No!" he screamed, the wind tearing the word from his mouth. "No, you're wrong. I'm ruined. Don't you understand? You did this to me. You and Vance. You made me a laughingstock." She took her final steps, stopping directly in front of him. He was taller, but at that moment, he had never looked so small. "Don't forget to subscribe for more content that challenges your view of the world," she whispered, her voice a thread of steel. "I did nothing. I simply arrived. I existed. Your own ego, your own arrogance, your own need to belittle me, to aggrandize yourself. That is what ruined you. You stood on that gala floor and sneered at me. You told me to know my limitations because you couldn't bear the idea that I had none. You built your house on a foundation of sand, Ethan, and you are blaming the tide for rising. You are not a laughingstock because of me. You are a laughingstock because you are one." He had no response. He simply stared, mouth agape, as the truth of her words, the final brutal clinical assessment, hit him. She held his gaze for one more second. Then she turned her back and walked the remaining steps to her aircraft. "Elena, no, no!" he cried out, a sound of pure, childlike desperation. "Don't do it! Don't leave! You can't just leave me here!" She did not stop. She climbed the steps, her movements fluid and unhurried. She reached the top, gave a single nod to the pilot visible in the cockpit, and stepped inside. The heavy door began to hiss shut. Ethan, in one final desperate lunge, ran forward, hands outstretched. "Elena!" The door sealed with a solid, final thunk. It was a sound of absolute finality, the sound of a vault closing. Ethan pounded the metal with his ungloved fists, slamming against the cold fuselage. "No, let me in! Elena, come back!" He might as well have been pounding a mountain. The engines, which had been on a low idle, suddenly surged in pitch, screaming louder. The propellers became a blur. Then, a transparent-looking disc, a burst of prop wash, a hurricane of ice and snow blasted from the engines, hitting Ethan with the force of a physical blow. He was thrown backward, stumbling, shielding his face as the icy shrapnel cut his exposed skin. He fell, landing hard on his back on the icy runway. Through the blinding whiteout, he watched, prostrate and pathetic, as the Pilatus taxied, turned its nose into the wind, and without a moment of hesitation, accelerated down the runway. It took off with an impossible power and grace, ascending at a steep, aggressive angle, disappearing into the heavy gray clouds in seconds. And then silence. The engine roar faded, instantly replaced by the high, thin, lonely moan of the wind. Ethan Thorne lay on the runway, the snow beginning to fall on him again, settling on his ruined suit and his unseeing eyes. He was left alone in the cold, with nothing but the crushing, absolute, inescapable weight of his own ordinariness. Conclusion and final call to action. The epilogue of consequence. In the end, this was never a story of revenge. Revenge would have required Elena to care. This was a story of consequence. Ethan Thorne built his entire world on the idea of image, of belittling others to feel tall. He thought the ultimate flex was his new fiancée, his new boss, and his new life. But he forgot the most important rule. The quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. He sneered at her as ordinary, failing to realize he was the only one who couldn't see the truth. She didn't need to defeat him. She only needed to be herself. And in the end, her silence was louder and more devastating than any of his bluster. What are your thoughts on Elena's story? What do you think Ethan does next? If you enjoyed this story, hit like and share this video with someone who appreciates a story of quiet power. And subscribe for more stories where the ordinary turns out to be anything but.